It's finally done. The hardest challenge I've ever done on this channel. A true survival run with little to no options to actually survive. I was tasked with beating the game on survival mode with all of my stats set to 1. No perks when I leveled up, and to make things even worse, I wasn't even allowed to use power armor either, as that would increase my strength and endurance. This was gonna be tough, and I expected nothing else, but just how difficult this could be never once crossed my mind. This challenge took nearly a month to get the footage and edit everything up, so if you like what you see, consider subscribing as it helps me out a lot, and let's just see how hard this was. I picked to play as Daddy Howard intended this time and tormented my family until the Vault Tech rep came. For this run I started in very hard to be able to change my stats for the challenge, which I did before making it to the vault. After watching my wife die, I made my way through the vault and back to Sanctuary to make a save point and to start the run. Next stop was Red Rocket Garage to pick up dog meat, and then to Concord to attempt saving the Minutemen, which didn't go very well. So instead we made our way to the Starlight Drive-In to kill a horde of mole rats and create another save. Now came the long journey to Diamond City. I tried to stop by the Cambridge Police Department, but ghouls had other ideas. However, I'm a very stubborn person and persevered to grab my next save, and I scored a laser rifle, which was a decent damage boost this early into the run. Making it to Diamond City from here was a breeze, and after getting the whereabouts of Nick Valentine, I stopped by the Dugout Inn where I would become a very frequent visitor. Now came the rescue mission of the century. I died a couple times trying to get to the metro where Nick was being held captive, but after having learned where the first couple of triggermen were, I was able to take them out and use a sleeping bag as my next save point. The rest of the metro was a very slow but safe slog, as I was using a pipe sniper rifle I picked up earlier to take out enemies from afar, but due to my low level at this point, I was able to take out most of the triggermen with 1 or 2 shots with bonus damage from being hidden. When I got to the halfway point, I had to use a submachine gun to take out Dino, but I saved Nick and now we could get the hell out of here. Between Nick taking most of the aggro and Dogmeat and I taking pot shots where we could, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be, as this vault had tons of beds to rest at and reset if I died. Eventually our group of misfits arrived at Skinny Malone and the shooting almost immediately started, but with the submachine gun and Nick acting as a tank, we were able to take out the mobsters and leave the vault. Now that Nick owed me a solid, we made it back to Diamond City, and after a bit of chit-chat and persuasion, he agreed to help me break into someone's house and then track down Kellogg. Now, normally making it to Fort Hagen is pretty uneventful, but on survival, it's an absolute nightmare. I tried to follow Dogmeat instead of just going my own way, and this was painful. Dogmeat purposely runs you into combat, like a Yao Guai, for example. So instead of staying the course, I ran away from the suicidal dog and made it to Fort Hagen, except I wasn't ready for the nonsense that waited for me here. Yeah, see, even though the synths here were still low level, they hit so hard I was basically one shot from anything they did. And at this point in the run, I decided I would have to bust out some strats if I was actually going to pull this off. So now came the journey back to Diamond City, and even though I got my shit kicked in by a town of ghouls along the way, between bed hopping and taking it slow, I made it back with little setback. Now that I was somewhere safe, it was time to get a weapon to actually do some damage, and luckily that particular weapon was only just up the road. What I needed was a rocket launcher, and some raiders at Backstreet Apparel were nice enough to let me take it from them. However, even though getting the weapon was easy, the next part of this plan wasn't. What I was trying to do was a mod swap, essentially adding a rocket launcher barrel onto my 10mm pistol, making every bullet fire a rocket instead of a normal pistol round. The only issue is even though I could perform the false attach with fast button inputs and manage to add the barrel onto the new weapon, the pistol still shot pistol rounds instead of rockets. This is because you actually have to swap a targeting computer onto the weapon, and I just could not get the timing down for this. So instead I decided to go with Old Reliable. I strolled on over to Good Neighbor and borrowed a Fat Man from Cleo, and then made my way back to Diamond City to perform the weapon swap ritual and bestow the Merv pistol onto my character. Since every enemy at this point was able to one-shot me, I figured this would level the playing field. The hike back to Fort Hagen was laughably more calm this time around, and inside I got to work. This pistol is great for evicting any enemy from life, but I had to be careful because I was way more likely to blow myself up in the process. On the bright side, this place had a lot of high ceilings and allowed me to shoot down hallways to clear out the synths. and if I needed to, there were tons of beds either outside or inside to save at. All in all, with the Merv pistol in hand, this place was so much more manageable, and Kellogg got the exact same treatment. 2 shots and his boss fight was over and done. All that was left to do was check his search history and head back to Diamond City. Once there, I got the intel to go visit Dr. Amari in Good Neighbor and then dove through Kellogg's memories to find out about the Institute and teleportation. I would have never guessed. However, I had to do some prep in the form of clothes shopping before I could make the trek into the glowing sea to meet up with Virgil, a scientist of the Institute. And luckily this could be done in Diamond City. I had to go visit Becky Fallon and buy the radiation suit because I couldn't use power armor this time around. But where this gave me damn near immunity to radiation, it offered no other damage resist, meaning I was going to have to be on my toes when crossing the glowing sea. Now, crossing Radiation Central took some trial and error, as there wasn't a bed close to the glowing sea at all, so I got killed a couple times by some pretty spicy wildlife. But when I did actually make it further in and to the Children of Adam, I began to panic as I still hadn't come across any beds, but I figured Virgil would have one? And to no one's surprise, super mutants are just built different and would rather sleep on steel frames and tires. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part is now I had to make the hike back across the glowing sea, and if I died, I'd have to redo this entire part. So I took my time, crouching the entire way, and when I eventually made it out of the glowing sea, I lost where my last save point was, which meant I had to practically run all the way back to Diamond City, and let me tell you, my nerves were acting up. I was stressing so bad, but thankfully I made it to a save and could finally continue the run. After the completion of one of 2 glowing sea runs, I was feeling pretty good and decided to go straight over to the courser at Green Tech Genetics. Luckily there was a bed nearby so the run back wouldn't be so bad, but man, these gunners were not playing around this time, and to make matters worse, the ceilings in this place were weird. By that I mean sometimes the Merv pistol would go where I wanted it to, and the other times I would blow up. Meaning I had to use other weapons for the majority of this place, but the weapons I had did nothing against the enemies here, and that feeling of doing well dissipated faster and faster the more times I died, and this went on for hours. Hours of frustration had me rethinking all my choices up to this point, but what else could I do? Nick was basically useless, and the one gun I had to wipe this place out was killing me more than the bad guys. So in an attempt to change up the strategy, I turned a pipe gun into a gamma weapon, but after giving it to Nick and coming back to test it out of the gunners, it almost looked like we were doing even less damage than before. So in desperation, I scoured the internet for some kind of tip to help me here, and I came across someone doing a speedrun with the Spray and Pray, a legendary submachine gun with explosive rounds. Only issue is, this thing was crazy expensive, so I did some scrounging since I didn't have any perks or ways to lower the price, and this took about 2 hours of wheeling and dealing to get the caps to buy the weapon. But in the end, I did get the gun, and now it was time to see if it would do anything against the gunners. This gun is absolutely nuts. It was ripping through these guys left, right, and center, and after only a few tries, I made it the farthest I had ever done in this place. But the nerves were starting to kick in. My stomach was at knots, and the higher I went, knowing one death would reset the whole place terrified me. Continuing in, I finally made it to the final path up to the courser, and at this point I felt like I was going to throw up. I pulled out the Merv pistol, and I knew if I fucked this up, I was screwed. But the shot went through, and I got the courser chip I needed. Only problem is now I had to make it to a bed. My stomach was in my throat now. I was stressing so bad, but after maneuvering around a possible raider camp, I was able to rest and save. This run wasn't going to beat me yet, but it did warrant some much needed rest. Now that I was free from hell, I made my way to the railroad and got my chip scanned. Then made my way to a Brotherhood of Steel site to set up a save before I made my last glowing sea trip. Heading into the glowing sea this time was easy. Nothing could stop the Merv pistol, and I made my way to Virgil to get the teleportation plans. Now I had to pick a faction to help out. And seeing as since teleportation was illegal in this run, I figured the Minutemen made the most sense, and then made the long journey up to Concord. Normally one fast travel away, this trip took 40 minutes to cover this distance. But the Raiders in Concord didn't stand a chance between the Spray and Pray and the Merv pistol, and even the Deathclaw that showed up got slapped. So since I freed the homies, now I could start gaining rep with them. And I don't know what you were thinking, but this wasn't going to go any other way. Only problem is, after gaining some rep, it was time to build the teleporter to get into the Institute, and sadly, I didn't have all the pieces this time. Luckily, the military-grade circuit board wasn't very far away. Only issue was, it was guarded by a robot whose sole purpose in life was to shake me down for my lunch money every time it saw me. But all I had to do was find the lunchtime bully outside and give it a nuclear howdy-do. Now, with my missing piece in hand, I made it back to Sanctuary to build the teleporter and met up with Walt Disney in the experimental Project City of Tomorrow. I told him I didn't really care for Mickey and I was more of a Goofy fan, so he kicked me out and dumped me near the CIT ruins, which meant I had to walk all the way back to Sanctuary. Thanks a lot, boss. But on the way back, I set up a settlement for the homies, so I guess it wasn't all bad. Now came a very, very long rep game with the Minutemen. Killing the quest givers failed the quest, but gave progress with the faction, but I'm pretty sure I had to have so many successful missions to proceed, so I could have made this take way less time. But rather bore you with the running around in the Commonwealth, which resulted in getting stuck on missions that would last over an hour, I'll just sum up the entire survival experience until now. It's no surprise that this challenge was hard. That's a given. Having glass bones and paper skin meant that if an enemy looked at me a certain way, I just died. The Merv pistol was doing its job at clearing out enemies, but the longer into the run we got, the more dangerous it was to use. Yes, it was a one-shot to most enemies, but that meant I had to stand out in the open to not botch the shot, which would usually result in my death anyway. So there was a lot of time taken between sessions to not lose my sanity. And as far as food and water went, this actually wasn't that bad. Because most enemies were raiders or wildlife, I just ate whatever they had and drank enough irradiated water to turn me into a walking nightlight. On top of that, diseases didn't really hinder me here either, as since I kept up all of my other stats and got plenty of sleep, it meant that whatever disease I did get would lower my stats, and since they're at 1, it doesn't really do anything. And the more troublesome ones like infection, which caused damage over time, hardly ever showed up. With that summary out of the way and almost 10 hours later, we finally arrived at defending the castle. Believe it or not, this also was pretty easy, partly due to the fact that I had acquired some sweet new digs while setting this place up, and since that it was all outside, meant I could rain down nukes with little to no worry, plus there were tons of beds to sleep in mid-fight to quick save. After the nukes stopped falling, I had to run back over to Sanctuary to get the detail from Sturgis on a secret entrance into the Institute, and now it was time to finish the run. But this was so much easier said than done. I cannot express that enough. I swear, this end mission was so frustrating, I thought this was going to be the run ender. The main issue here was the crazy amount of radiation that came from creeping through the sewers. That's fine. But it meant I had to use the hazmat suit. So on one hand, I didn't take very much radiation damage, but on the other hand, that meant that if I stubbed my toe, I died. And to make matters worse, the first 2 enemies were laser turrets that were both one-shot kills. And if I somehow made it past them, I had to deal with a mole rat broodmother, and besides her also being a one-hit kill, I had to pray that in using the spray and pray to kill her, I didn't blow myself up with explosive damage or have her sneak up on me. But that latter one happened way more than I'd like to admit. Between surviving these first 3 enemies, it took hours, and when I decided to just use a stealth boy and make a run for it, I did finally find a reliable strat. The idea was to take out the turrets and broodmother, sneak about halfway through the sewers, pop the stealth boy and drink a Nuka-Cola to give me enough action points to run through the sewer invisible. And because fighting the rest of this place was outside of the question, being the majority of this place had ghouls in the water, this seemed like a much safer option. And once I managed to survive the dash through the waterways, I could don my Minutemen armor and finally take out the remaining synths to finally call for backup. But this was only the halfway point, mind you. Now, with the Minutemen's help, we pushed through the Institute, and by we, I mean I stayed way back and let the seemingly infinite number of Minutemen clear out the synths while I moved forward to trigger fights. Things were going pretty well, but then I noticed that there were no beds to save in. And I think that realization kicked in when we arrived at the main Institute hub. But in a move that I would only call desperate, I pulled out the Merv pistol and just started lighting up the room with nukes, which surprisingly worked and didn't kill me or have the homies turn on me, which is always a plus. This was the turning point I needed. I made my way to Father's room and opened up the fusion reactor, and then my posse rolled through the rest of the Institute slowly but steadily. We made it to the reactor, and through some sneaky pod shots at the last legendary enemy of the run, we were able to clear out the area, set the bomb to blow up the Institute, and teleport away to watch the fireworks, ending by far the hardest run I've done to date. Believe it or not, the actual survival part of this run was easy. I think the hardest part was actually dealing with the minimum stats causing a gust of wind to kill me. It took forever and caused a lot of frustration, but I'm glad it's done and I can cross another suggestion off the list. I don't plan on doing survival for a little while after this one, so bear with me. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing as it helps the channel out a ton. Plus, if you have a suggestion for a challenge run you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. I play all sorts of games, so no challenges off the table. I want to thank all of you that watched to this point, and as always, I've been Chris from Crisis Gaming, and I will see you on the next one.